Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to retort to the assertion that Christianity kills, and in fact to demonstrate through recent history that in fact it's the enemies of Christianity kill, in particular atheism. Now before I begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti, Amen. Gloria Patri Filio et Spiritui Sancto, secutor in principio et nec et semper et seculi seculorum. Amen. So you commonly get this argument from a lot of agnostics / atheists, especially the new atheists, maybe from 15 years ago. And of course, a lot of these people were raised Christian, and then normally they get inculcated by radical doctrine in college that Christianity kills a lot of people. But this is in fact not true. We have episodes here on how to deal with the Crusades, how to deal with the Inquisition and other questions like that, because these are the big boogeymans that people bring up about Christianity. Well, you had the Inquisition and you killed a bunch of people in the Crusades. And so we're not going to spend time on that because we have an episode specific to that. But if you look, and no doubt there were religious wars. You look at the 30 Years' War, you look at the War of Germany after Luther that ended with the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 and the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, the end of the 30 Years' War. It's not just that religion did not play a role in European wars in previous centuries. But when you get to the period of Enlightenment, and really actually at the end of 30 Years' War, you saw Protestant and Catholic kingdoms uniting in an alliance to defeat another Catholic kingdom. So at the end of 30 Years' War, it wasn't even a religious war. It started with the defenestration of Prague and all these things that was religious. But by the end of it, it was all political, as a lot of wars are. But if you look after the Enlightenment, the enemies of Christianity killed more. Look at the French Revolution. We have an episode here, the real story behind the French Revolution. And if you look at it, it was so different than the American Revolution. Please don't ever compare the two. But the French Revolution was exceedingly radical. At the beginning, not so much, but once the Jacobins entered and you had the Reign of Terror with Robespierre, they were targeting Christians, particularly Catholics. They were targeting Catholics. They were desecrating monasteries, doing horrible things to nuns. There was a lot of martyrdom of priests if you didn't take the oath to the new constitution. They installed a whore on the altar of Notre Dame Cathedral, the one that recently burnt down, and they consecrated it, and they changed the calendar because it was too Christian. It was really an attack on Christianity, and that killed, if you look at the French Revolution and the wars that spawned from it, that was a 25-year war, including famously Napoleon. That killed more people than the Inquisition, the Crusades, and the 30 Years' War, and every war combined. But that was just like the aperitif. That was like the appetizer. Then you roll into the 19th century, and you look at the revolutions in Europe. They were all essentially anti-clerical, anti-Christian. The Revolution of 1830, the Revolution of 1848, the Paris Commune in 1870. These were all radical forces, socialists. In fact, in the French Revolution started, but then, of course, Marx came in the mid-century. But a lot of these were spirits against Christianity movements. And certainly by the Paris Commune, that was definitely infused by Marxism. And if you look at these revolutions, you could argue it was a fight for economic liberalism. And it was a fight to have an economy that was not mercantilistic, and to have freedom of religion and a bunch of things, and to have sovereignty of city-states. Like if we're a certain ethnic group, the principle of self-determination, as Woodrow Wilson would later kind of flesh out after World War I. But it was some of that. But if you look at the literature and the ideology that infused these revolutions that spread across Europe in those aforementioned years, they were largely anti-Christian. And then even with the 19th century, I mean, that was nothing compared to the 20th century. If you look at the wars of the 20th century, they were pretty heinous. If you look at, in particular, the regimes that were nominally agnostic or overtly atheist or overtly satanic, like Hitler and the Nazis. Remember, Nazism is National Socialism. You know, there's this idea that some people believe, which I think if anybody reads anything on the Nazis knows, Hitler was not a Christian. This was not a Christian war against the Jews or whatnot. You had 3 million Catholics, including priests, murdered in concentration camps. It was not Christian-led. It was really led by the occult. The SS was deep into the occult, and theosophy and these other things like that. But if you look at countries that were overtly atheist, they had exceedingly reign of terror. And who did they have reign of terror against? Lots of times it was the Christians. Not just the Christians, but if you look at like the Soviet Union was overtly anti-Christian. You have to remember, when it comes to communism, which is the radical form of Marxism, it was the violent overthrow of the state, but it was also the destruction of private property, the destruction of the family, and of course, the destruction of Christianity. That's the principal platform. And really, you can go back to Adam Weishaupt in the original Illuminati of 1776. They had the same platform, right? There's this reoccurring theme all through this time of destroying Christianity, destroying the family, destroying private property, and whatnot. So in the Soviet Union, starting with Lenin, I mean, they just desecrated the Orthodox Church. They desecrated and martyred so many Christians, Catholic or Eastern. And if you look at the numbers, not just outright persecution or sending people to the camps like the Gulag Archipelago, all these, the well-known Solzhenitsyn book, but also through bad economic management. Think of the famine in the Ukraine. You're looking 50 million people. Then if you look at another overtly atheist regime that was worse than the Soviet Union, you look at Mao's China. Mao's China estimates, it's impossible to know what the great leap forward in the Cultural Revolution, 80 million? Yeah, many of these people were not Christian, but still, they were 80 million people that died at the hands of an overtly atheist regime. You look at Cambodia with Pol Pot, crazy tyrant. 1/3 of the population of the country murdered. Anywhere where communism goes in, they're not friendly toward life, and they target any established religion because they want you to worship the state. And if you doubt these numbers, go read the Black Book of Communism and just read the abstract. This was a book published by Harvard, and Harvard is not some bastion of radical traditional Christianity. They admit it. I mean, the numbers are staggering what atheist regimes have done to people. They have not been good to people at all. And I remember when the war of Iraq happened with Baby Bush, with George H.W. Bush, how there was a study done in the universities, how more American students thought that Stalin was a better guy than Bush. And it's like, this just tells you how little people read history. And Orwell predicted that in 1984. Those who control the present control the past. And those who control the past control the future. So if you get the right change agents in high school social studies and certainly in college, they can spin the history any way they want, and we know that. So in closing, look, if you ever get this idea that Christianity killed people, Christianity has not killed people. And even if you look at present day, anytime there's strife in the world, Christianity is not the heart of it. We have something like 50 million Catholics, just Catholics, not just Christian Protestants, around the world that are under constant persecution. You normally see this in Africa, of course, in North Korea and other places like that, where martyrdom is very common. We are very lucky, you could say maybe unlucky, here in the United States, where we're not dealing with these things that embolden our faith. Martyrdom and persecution embolden your faith. Just look at the early Christians of the Roman times. But Christianity is not a violent faith. And certainly you can see that borne out in history in the last 150 years, that the most violent regimes are those that turn away from God and are just overtly anti-God. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care, God bless, and pray.